Oh, it is indeed. So, who can we start with? Goodness me, what an amazing panel we have today. And we'll be talking about sustainability in the global community. So I think we're going to really want to start thinking about how we can think about things not just on a local level, but incorporating many different factors. And we might even start talking about gender equality, I hope, at some point today, and how that might be part of a sustainable solution. So can we start with Miriam? Could you unmute and introduce yourselves? And
absolutely. Thanks, Gabriella, and thanks for the organizers of the forum and inviting me. It was just like I was sitting here and thinking, like, do I need to unmute? Don't I need to unmute? Makes a bit like a lottery. Who's next? Or bingo. So hello everyone. My name is Miriam Roda. I'm from Aston University. I'm a researcher at the Energy and Bioproducts Research Institute, also called EBRI. And maybe a bit quick to my background. So by training, I'm an agricultural scientist, but I have a PhD in agro-sociology, and now I'm working in bioenergy in a very engineering community. But the focus of my research really is around sustainability of bioenergy and bioenergy systems, but also in the context on a transformation to a sustainable low carbon economy. And I'm really excited to be here because sustainability has been the kind of like the leading topic or the red threads throughout my career and throughout my research, as this is really one of the reasons why I actually do research, because I think sustainability is key for whatever we do. And while a lot of people think about sustainability in terms of maybe environmental issues, and other people might think of it about economic issues, and other people might think about it around more societal issues, I think it's important to bring these three dimensions of sustainability together and understand not just each aspect of sustainability, but actually the interfaces of sustainability. So how relate things to each other? So if, for example, if I design a really nice, sustainable, low carbon technology, how does that affect the other things? How does it affect the economy? How does it affect people? And I think that brings me to the main thing I would say about sustainability. Sustainability is actually about people. It's about behavior of people and how people are able to live in an environment wherever they are, and also about how things affect others. So it's not just about me or someone else, it's about a community, and also about if we do something, for example, in the UK, and if we have fancy technologies and great economies in one country, how does it actually affect and impact people in other countries? So really understanding the wider context that we're part of a system, and that's what sustainability is about. It is actually system-based research, and it's really important not just to see things in a nutshell, but really understanding the wider impact of what we do, how we behave, what decisions we make. Okay, that's what I actually want to say as an introduction, as a starting point for people to think about sustainability.
Miriam, could you just give a couple of words about your PhD research and how that's led into the project you do today?
Well, it hasn't in that sense, because my PhD was about, quite interesting, my PhD was about food habits and changing food habits in urban context in Africa. I did research in Sudan, so I spent quite some time in the Sudan, spending a lot of time sitting with women and families, cooking and eating. And to understand really not just, because a lot of people, when they talk about food security, they think about how much food is produced. That's actually how we eat things and who is part of a system and who gets what share sitting around the table, how things are prepared, how they're eaten, and how it links to the work I actually do today, because I work in bioenergy. And this is, again, very closely linked to agricultural systems, where the feedstock comes from, or how do we provide energy to, for example, prepare food, but also for other uses. What do people need energy for, and how can these energy be made sustainable, but also can ensure that people are involved, and also not that they are involved in a fair way, but how they're involved. So really understanding what are the roles of different people. And if I change something in the system, so for example, if I say, yes, we want to have bioenergy for a specific use, for example, as a biofuel, or let's go even for aviation fuels. So what does it actually mean if I start taking a biomass from a system which exists, and even if it's a waste at the moment, how does it affect the supply chain? How does it affect the people who are part of the supply chain? Where I have to make sure, do I involve the right people? Who are the beneficiaries of the system, of the things I do? Who has to pay for things? Who will benefit, for example, then from the sustainable fuels, aviation fuel? So who's able to get on the plane to fly somewhere, but who's also providing the feedstock to make the fuel? And who's paying maybe a carbon tax, or as part of a taxpayer, who's paying for this? So really understanding the wider system and the implication it has for a society as a whole, and not just for the individual, which might say like, oh, I'm very green, I'm using renewable fuels.
Amazing, thank you, Miriam. That's a great introduction. So yeah, I love talking about the system there. Perhaps we can move on to Tselego now, because I know that she's been doing some work around not just bringing sustainable ideas to countries, but also looking at a whole system. So Tselego, would you like to unmute and just talk about the work you've been doing?
Yeah, hi, my name is Tselego. I'm an electrical and electronic engineer. I'm also a director of WestKick. We're a community interest company. We look at introducing innovations in a more inclusive and sustainable way. As Miriam was saying, that within communities, you have to look at certain aspects we look at certain aspects in the community before we introduce, or our partners introduce, a certain innovation, just so that we may, in terms of like gender, who's going to be using it, a lot of human-centered design goes into the activities that we develop, so that the end user is always benefiting from the technology. I also wanted to add that because in our project at the moment, Simon is the lead, and he's got technology that I'm sure he'll be talking about soon, that's going to be introduced in Nigeria. What works in the UK doesn't necessarily work in Nigeria or in other rural areas, so that's one of the main things that needs to be considered. In the project, we thought about mechanizing this technology, but realized if we did mechanize it, then women's livelihood would be at stake. They would lose their livelihoods. So that's just a touch of what we've been doing as WestKick.
Yeah, and that's related to food production of cassava, right? Which is a staple in Nigeria. Yeah, so women are very much a part of the process. And so if we're going to change anything, we're going to bring sustainable, we need to make sure that it's brought in a way that protects their livelihoods.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, amazing work. That's great. Okay, so let's hear from Simon about this kind of technology that you want to bring to these communities.
I think the points that Tselego and Miriam just made were really crucial, actually, because you know, when we introduce this technology, it would be a disruptive technology, and so, you know, as like what Miriam was saying, you know, you're looking at an entire system, and how, you know, if you're going to obtain biomass to feed that system, what impact is that going to have on other people who are utilizing that biomass? And so that's what the work that WestKick and Tselego were doing, you know, using the human-centered design, was to map out that supply chain and identify who's going to be impacted in what way by us implementing this new disruptive technology. And the mechanized part of the process that we looked at, and we realized it would cause, you know, very negative disruption, was the peeling process of the cassava, because they pay a lot of people, you know, to manually peel the cassava. So if you mechanize that process, where are those people going to get paid from? You just displaced a whole load of people, you know, in their jobs. So, you know, we realized that we didn't need to mechanize that. But briefly about the technology, or about the company. So I'm the co-founder and CEO of Pyrogenesis. Pyrogenesis is a bioenergy and biofuels technology developer. And my co-founder, Dr. Joseph Eki, and I, and my other Chief Technical Officer, Dr. Mohammed Sagir, and also Dr. Joseph Sochi, invented a machine that effectively converts agricultural waste or agri-food processor waste into renewable electricity, low carbon heat, and biofuels simultaneously. So we are bringing this technology to market. We have done a lot of our own investment and raising finance, and secured grants to build a pilot plant. We have tested the pilot plant in the factory, and we're in the process of making the final changes and optimization to that pilot plant, and then we will begin running commercial trials. And so for the commercial trials, we're seeking to work with companies and communities who want to implement our technology, because maybe they use a lot of heat, they need a lot of electricity, they're nowhere near a grid, either gas or electricity grid, but they do have a lot of waste. So the thing that we think is going to be driving a lot of what we do is the whole net zero agenda. Now, if I could share my screen at this point, there are scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. And I'm not sure how familiar everybody is with those. I'll just click into this document here. So this is going to become some of the key drivers for everything that we do in bioenergy, right? Because with net zero, you've got a lot of governments have signed up to saying that they're going to implement targets that companies will have to comply with. And if they don't comply to reducing their carbon emissions, they'll be taxed or penalized very heavily, or cost them dearly. So it'd be cheaper for them to make sure that A, they reduce their carbon emissions, or B, they pay somebody else to reduce their carbon emissions, and they can use that emission reduction to offset against their own emissions. So scope 1 emissions are what any company, and this is the company that's been forced to report on its carbon emissions. This is what it directly, kind of like the carbon emissions associated with either its operations or any transportations that it's directly responsible for. Scope 2, of course, all companies use electricity and heat, typically in the UK. So that gas and electricity, the emissions are associated with where they're produced somewhere else, and those are always going to be producing, CO2, and they're upstream activities. And then scope 3 is like, okay, so in your supply chain, you're going to be using goods and services, and all along that supply chain, there's carbon emissions associated with each of these activities to get that good or service to you, okay, before you consume it. Okay, so they're all your upstream activities. So that's stuff that then comes to you. And then what you then pass down to get your product or service to the consumer is your downstream scope 3 emissions. Okay, so in reducing your carbon footprint, the expectation is that companies are going to have to reduce scope 1, 2, and 3. So that means if you're in a supply chain up here, okay, so for us, we're looking to work with agri-food processors in Africa. Now, I was just mentioning to Morgan, cassava, if you look at the back of the products of any kind of, what's it called, gluten-free, yeah, gluten-free products, you'll see they typically use cassava flour, yeah, quite a lot of them. So cassava flour has been produced in Africa, it's been shipped to Europe, and then it's converted into a product, at some point that then gets to the end customer, right? So that means people who produce cassava flour in Africa are going to be in a scope 3 emission for a UK biscuit manufacturer, gluten-free biscuits, for instance, yeah? And that means a supermarket might say, well, we want to reduce our scope 3 emissions. So that means the manufacturer in Africa has to tell them how it's going to reduce carbon emissions, all right? And I'll swap to this other, so if I stop sharing this now, and then I'll share the other one. Make sure I'm right. This is the other aspect I was talking about. So what's the difference between offsetting and carbon removal? So this is what I talked about. If you are producing a ton of CO2, okay, you're paying somebody else, typically carbon offsetting was they've reduced their carbon emissions, okay? You're still going to end up with 1 ton of CO2 going into the environment, okay? This is carbon removal. You've produced a ton of CO2, but a ton of CO2 has been physically removed from the environment, okay? And that's what our technology can do, you know, using the sequestration of biochar into agricultural soils. So that means that manufacturing, which previously used to be effectively always linked to the emission of carbon, so you're always going to get carbon going into the environment with manufacturing, can now move from that model to this model, which is truly net zero. And this is what's really powerful about carbon removal. So our technology is a carbon removal technology because in the process of giving you as a manufacturer your heat and electricity, we can also remove the carbon emissions that you're producing. And that's why I think, you know, it's a very powerful technology with a lot of application. It's just emerging now. You'll see there's a lot of companies that are springing up doing something similar, but that's we've chosen to focus on sub-Saharan Africa. There's going to be massive growth there, and you know, they really do need the investment that also potentially would come from people investing in net zero. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Simon. So informative. Gosh. And just to be clear, you know, you're looking at, in agriculture, you're looking at crop waste and looking at ways that you can use pyrolysis, which is the reaction in order to generate heat and electricity. But it also has a byproduct, which are these biofuels or biochar that you mentioned, and that those things can, the biochar can go straight into the ground. And you've sequestered that carbon into the ground, so it never gets released into the atmosphere. Is that right?
There is one, typically there'll be a step where you treat the biochar, because if you put biochar straight into an agricultural soil, you're potentially diluting the nutrients in that volume of soil. So you wouldn't necessarily put neat biochar onto a soil. You know, we've tested it and it doesn't give you the results that you'd want as a farmer. Yeah. But yeah, in short, you know, we're displacing fossil fuels in the generation of heat and electricity. You know, we can produce renewable biofuels, solid and liquid, and also once we have put that biochar through a treatment process, which is cost effective, it can then be beneficial on agricultural or horticultural applications. Yeah, because it typically reduces leaching of nutrients and increases the water retention of soils. So I heard somebody else speaking about, you know, drought. I think that was you, Miriam. You were speaking about, yeah, drought tolerance and resistance, or was it you, Morgan? So it can be used, you know, in applications, agronomic applications, to improve drought tolerance in, you know, semi-arid areas.
Amazing. Amazing work. Okay, great. And Louise, can't wait to hear about your work and all about the Centre for Alternative Technologies, because we did hear from Lucy yesterday and that she'd done a master's with you when she retrained and went into sustainability. So it'd be amazing to hear about, you know, what you offer and also, you know, your ethos and everything.
Okay, thanks. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, so hi, I'm Louise. I've been involved with the Centre for Alternative Technology since the mid to late 90s. I'm coming at this whole thing not as an individual business or company, but as more of a step right back and looking at the whole global issues all at once. And we are an educational charity set up in the 70s, when there was books like The Population Bomb and the oil crisis was happening, when there was a lot of people going off and making little sort of communes to try and live differently. So CAT stemmed from this kind of counterculture, not going with the flow ethos, but they were a bunch of scientists. They started off as a bunch of scientists. So by about 1977, they created the very first alternative energy strategy for the UK. And that was given to Tony Benn's, 10 copies went to Tony Benn's government, and we hope shaped things then. So if you'd have come to CAT then, the discourse was all about fuel, oil, and energy. And it still is to a degree. We've now got Zero Carbon Britain, which has been going now for 12 years, which is, I hear that you've had another talk recently that Lucy was at, where you were saying if you can't imagine a future, it can't happen. So this, like, imagining, like, where do we want to be on the other side of that bridge? And okay, how do we get there? And that's what ZCB is, Zero Carbon Britain. And obviously it keeps changing, the minutiae change. But that's ZCB, but I don't really work on the energy side of things. I'm actually a biologist by training and a microbiologist and a composter, interestingly, Simon. And I've also dealt with lots of organic waste streams, mainly in the UK, and you know, how to circularize them rather than this whole linear thing, which I think picks up on what Miriam said. About this linear thinking, especially as scientists and engineers, we have this, I don't know, I'm a lot older than most of you. My training was in the very late 80s. And we knew then we had a massive problem. When I was 15, we knew we had a massive problem. We now, luckily, have most of the solutions at our fingertips. So why isn't it happening? And Miriam put her finger on the button there when she said it's behavior change. It's all about changing behaviors so that we can create maybe many little life rafts all over everywhere. So when there's a time of flux, like now with COVID, there's a time of flux, and what happened? All those little rafts of internet technology like Zoom just went boom. They were just the ones that were able to grow went massive. And if we create loads of those in farming, in education, in SUDS and flooding, and all in everywhere, and train as many people up as possible in all these different things, we can multi-solve. And like Simon and Miriam have both said, it's if you step back and look at the systems and the bigger picture, you can do something like urban greening, for example. You can just plant, I mean, really, to save the world, all we really have to do is plant trees and stop consuming quite so much. It's actually really simple on one level, and then it's really complicated when you look into it. So it's, you know, it's not that simple either. But the linear systems we have, you can crack them doing very simple things like planting trees in streets. So what will that do? It will clean the air, it will slow down flooding, it will make people happier when they walk down the street, it will increase biodiversity, it will make people more likely to use active travel, which will in turn make people less likely to use their cars, which in turn will be less people on the street, which will then make more people do active travel, blah-de-blah-de-blah. So getting out of that linear thinking, when you look up things like, for example, green infrastructure or green energy production, you'll find lots of academic papers, and they're all like, oh, we are as good as the grey ones. We are as good, honestly. And it's all, we're almost like having to stick up for ourselves somehow, having to say we're as good. Whereas when you look at grey infrastructure, you actually don't find anything because it is the status quo. It's how, so there's also disruption and disrupting those systems that are working against us. And often it's big business working against us, but individuals within those businesses aren't horrible people. It's that the business itself doesn't have a soul. So you can be working in your job for something that you believe in a company that you don't, that doesn't necessarily do everything you like, and often does a lot of really not very nice things. So for me, as starting as a biologist, I've now moved much more into the social science of where do we get that hook? Where do we get that bit of agency or movement where we can talk to someone who on the surface is against what we're doing or has opposing views? They have often similar values. They always love their families. They've always got, you know, there's always things that you can bring together. And by doing that, we can create this change. But also looking at, I mean, going in now from the big picture, looking at the difference between policy and practice. Often the policy is put in very well, meaning and the people on the big business who are all on the boards of all the you know, the what's it called, lobbying groups, they're all pushing against, saying we can't have that, we can't have that, it will wreck the business. But just understanding that difference and the difficulty between policy and practice helps us sneak in and find a way of creating climate justice and sustainably adapting to a different future. I'm going to quickly share my screen and show you our little, where am I? Teams, no Zoom. What am I sharing? That one. Yeah. So this is the CAT website, and you can see that that's the 1977 energy strategy. And then all of these you can download for free. All these reports, Zero Carbon Britain, and then there's loads, raising the ambition, and we're going up and up, making it happen. And this is rising to the climate and biodiversity emergency is the latest one, 2019, that was published. So really, really handy resources for you. Also, if I go to the graduate school, which is where I teach, we teach MScs in loads of different areas, if you like, but a lot of the course content is cross-disciplinary. So for example, I just taught the natural materials, building materials module, and I taught that to ecologists, I taught it to engineers, I taught it to food and natural resources people. And that's because quite often when we're in a closed academic setting, even though we know about systems thinking, we're still stuck in those silos. So if we can get out of those occasionally to look at, you know, if I build with straw, what happens to the farmers? If I build with straw, what happens? What about the food? What about how does this work? What about if it's organic? How do we get it there? Do you see what I mean? It's all linked up. So that's a little bit about our courses. If you want to talk about those to me later, we'll talk at the end. But something I did want to plug very briefly is that we've got a page on webinars on what's coming up, and we've got a whole climate justice series coming up, which you might find really interesting, because there's a whole school of thought around ecofeminism and kind of around, until we get rid of these hierarchies in thinking, like, for example, higher plants, lower plants, higher people, lower people. We aren't really going to rise to the challenge of climate change. So again, there's loads of papers on that, and it's bringing those back in to create this change. A massive subject. Sorry if I've rambled a bit.
Thank you so much, Louise. There's so much information that I could just jump on. I'm sure like maybe the other panelists can jump in as well if they had anything, comments on some of those incredible concepts that Louise has just brought up. If I just started off, we did have a question yesterday about whether we should be boycotting companies that supposedly aren't doing enough to be more sustainable, or should we be going into the belly of the beast? And I'm just wondering, after that, what you've said there, Louise, or if anyone else had any questions, comments on that. Should we be going into the belly of the beast in order to create change from within? Miriam, perhaps you could speak on that.
Well, I think the world is not black and white, and there are a lot of nuances and opportunities and challenges to things. And we always have to ask us, why is something in a way it actually is? And usually it takes two to tango. So obviously you have enough of companies, you know, who play, let's say, by their own rules, by their own interests. But then you have a lot of stakeholders actually supporting this and understanding why this is actually happening. I mean, in the news at the moment, you know, Amazon's big in the news for not paying tax or paying very little tax. But then you see all the people actually using it. So we're a lot of us who might say, oh, they are, let's call them bad people or bad companies, actually supporting them one way or the other. Or if you take the big oil companies, how many people would say like, oh, they're bad, but I'm driving a car? And I think it's always about a conscious behavior. So being, you know, as we say about bias or unconscious bias, being actually aware of why we do things and how we do things. And I think what we all need to ask ourselves is, if we do something, we need to understand, or we need to be aware of what we do and also why we do it. So why, you know, even if I just go to a shop and want to buy a pint of milk, why am I actually doing it? And then the next question would be, how does it not just affect me? So I might just, you know, I might do it because I want a pint of milk. That can be a really simple answer. But what does it actually do to others? So how does it affect others or other things, maybe in my immediate environment, but also further on? So I think starting at your own doorstep is really important before starting to point fingers at others and saying, you need to change or this need to change. And having worked in climate change research for a really long time, I have people coming and saying like, so what do we need to do to stay within the climate change targets? And there's the temptation to say, oh, we need to do this and this and this. But I'm, as a scientist, obviously I'm independent. My thoughts are usually, when they're on my professional side, based on evidence. My role is to show people the consequences of their behavior, not to say you need to do this and this and this, but to make them aware of what their behavior actually will lead to. And I think that is a first step, that people become aware and conscious of what they do. And I think that will help to then also get to the point to say like, oh, maybe I don't necessarily need to do this, or maybe I can do it a bit differently, or maybe I don't do it at all. So I think it's kind of like for ourselves being aware of the consequences and the trade-offs of our behavior.
So on that, sorry, Simon, you've been working in developing countries. It's very well and good to be looking at our conscious, being conscious about our actions in a developed country. We can go to the store, everything's very convenient for us. It's a luxury. But what is it like when you're working in countries such as you have in sub-Saharan Africa, looking at sustainability?
Sustainability won't necessarily be as high up the agenda in those countries. There are more pressing challenges like, you have to generate your own electricity using diesel, and what's happening to the price of diesel. And then there's currency, foreign exchange fluctuations. So if you've survived all of that by the end of the week, you've done well. However, if you are trying to access a global market and that global market is telling you, well, these are the standards and specifications you're going to have to meet in order to trade with us, if you want to access that market and you want to grow your, your market share and your revenue base and all the rest of it, then companies who are in that position would, they won't need government policies to tell them to do that. It's just the way the market works, it's economics. I think one of the things that you said though, Gabriella, that is really challenging is for people who are starting their careers, well, which company, should you go for, the more virtuous one or the one that doesn't seem to care? Okay, there's a lot of people now that you'll be competing with who will want the virtuous jobs. Yeah. So, you're going to have to work really hard and you're going to have to do something to shine and show how that you're really seriously committed to this course of action. So, finding companies that you can do a placement with or even volunteer. I think most of my greatest, accomplishments started with volunteering, giving my time and my talents for free. To say, look, I don't need to get paid to do this. I'll do it for free. I love it. I'm that serious about it. I just want an opportunity to get experience in this. And And that's not an endorsement for employers to take advantage of students and use their labor for free. But it's more a case that you need to make sure that whatever way you can to develop your profile, so traveling to places and getting involved in one way, shape or form with, trying to provide solutions or just even trying to understand and how to be useful in those settings will mean that when you're in an interview, if you want to go for a virtuous company and it's very competitive, then they'll be more impressed, by your life experience. So, we're recruiting at the moment. One of the hardest things that we are finding that we've got to do is try and recruit people in the UK who are prepared to work in less developed countries. And, I'm glad to say that this is something that West, and Salego, you did a lot of work on this as well. Maybe you can talk about it. But, where will I find young people that are trained in the UK, to degree level, who are willing to work in somewhere like Nigeria in the back of beyond, in the bush, and if, how do I get these people to an interview? And then, so there's all these kind of ways that once you've had life experience and you show that you're somebody that can solve any problem that's thrown at you with no preparation at all, you're going to be very useful to a lot of organizations. And you need to be able to know how to solve problems by working, collaborating. So that's brilliant to see a collaboration between UOB and Aston, because it's collaboration that's going to really, enable a team of people to take on very big challenges. So all of these things are going to be needed to, try and bring around change. And if you can bring around change, if you're the type of person that can bring change to an organization, you can go into the belly of the beast because you're going in there to change it. If you don't know how to bring about change, it will change, it will consume you, and you'll just become, another cog in the machine, and you'll be part of the problem, not part of the solution. I've always seen myself as a change agent. I worked in local government, but whilst I was there, I made change happen. And I remember people always telling me, "Oh, don't worry, they'll soon beat it out of you. You'll soon wear off. You'll soon be just like everybody else." But no, I was adamant and determined that I was going to achieve change. And once I'd achieved change, guess what? I wasn't in local government anymore because I'd done what I'd gone there to do, and then it was time to move on. And I think that's what you've got to look at life as, is life is an opportunity to make change happen. You're going to need to work with lots of different people. You yourself are going to have to be really prepared with a big toolbox of different skills. You need to be able to get on with who you're working with. I don't like working with people I don't like, so I won't work with them. I'll find a way to let somebody else work with them. But yeah, try and figure out a way that you can work with people and that you can get on well together, and make something that will outlive you once you've left that place, and then you'll have acquired lots of useful experiences and skills, and then go and make change somewhere else again. So hopefully that's useful.
Salego, do you want to talk a little bit about your experience, especially as a recent graduate, because you just graduated a year ago now?
Yeah, a year ago. So for me personally, when I was looking for a graduate job, I was very value driven. I wanted the company to have the same morals as me, has the same values as me, and it was really hard to find a company with the same anything. Well, a lot of things they weren't really accessible. I did have to do a lot of research, but it did pay off, thankfully. But I think within our generation, I can only speak for my generation because those are the people that I'm around, but we're very value orientated and moral, and we have morals that we're not willing to change to get into a company. Well, these are the people around me anyway, I should say, maybe not the whole generation. But I think in terms of that, within the future, I think there's going to be a lot more change because people are more outspoken now, and we also have the internet. With a click of a finger, you can read up anything about anything. So especially within sustainability, people are a lot more aware of it now than they were previously, which is obviously a wonderful thing. And also, if I was to talk a little bit about social media, you have all these influencers who are trying to make a change, even if it's a small one, as like don't use plastic straws or whatever it is, they're still promoting the idea of sustainability, which I think a lot of the younger people can relate to, compared to someone who's a lot older than them saying, oh yeah, this is what's happening in the climate, XYZ, this is the things that I need to change. But if they start off smaller now, especially when they're young, I think they're able to get to those bigger steps and then go into the belly of the beast, as they say, and make those changes, because they're more aware of everything else around them, because they've been conditioned or aware of it from a lot younger age than the norm now. So, yeah.
I'm wondering, Louise, if you've noticed this change in tide, perhaps, that Selego is alluding to.
Yes and no. So yes, great. There are more people interested in climate change and there's more people being sustainable, but no, our figures are still going up. So on the one hand, we've got, like it's what I said earlier in a way, we've got the people who want change. Loads of small businesses now, if you look on Etsy or Vinted, or there's loads of small businesses of people saying, I'm not changing my values, I'm going to start my business really small and I'm only going to do ethical stuff, for example. But then you've got every single advert, bit of media, you click on a great app for sustainability, you get ads saying you've got to buy this or you'll be a sad person, you've got to buy this, you've got to buy this. You know, it's completely normal now to get a coffee on the way to work. It wasn't when I was young. I know this sounds really weird, but there's these changes that we have made to create more consumption gradually over the last mainly 30 years, actually, since we've really known about climate change. And unless we kick back against what we can, I'm not saying kick back against everything. I also have a car. I live in a rural place. I would love not to have a car, but until we can affect transformation, i.e. get a great bus route, I can't, you know, so I'm not whiter than white. Sometimes I buy unorganic brand new clothing, you know, my kids go to the shops. But celebrating what we have and we can what we can use and we're responsible for. And then also, if, like Selego said, and Simon actually, and in fact Miriam, making changes either from within or without. So as a young student, you might be thinking, how am I going to get into this field? It's so hard. Actually, you just need to have good communication skills and a brain that's willing to be open-minded. And when I look at people who come to CAT, they either kind of are willing to accept this big picture and warts and all, or they hate it and they want to leave, and that's fine. They can go on and do other things. They might find something meaningful in a much more tightly siloed area, if you like. But as a student that wants to get a job, there are some really, really good jobs in what might be considered unethical or slightly like not values driven companies, let's say that. And you know, they've been known for greenwash and this and that, but if you can get in there, sometimes it's quite wearing, because if you're but it's not always a problem. So when you look into companies, like when Simon was in local government, if you had Simon as your boss or your employee, you would be empowered to do more. And now he's left it, they're all empowered to do more. So they're carrying on that all without him. So if you go for a job like in local company, in local government, or in local, I don't know, testing water quality or something like that, I don't know what chemists do, biocomposites or something, as long as you've got your values in there, you can make an influence. there's loads of free webinars. There's loads of free online courses. I'm going to do a 10 credit Connecting to Nature course through Plymouth, Portsmouth, somewhere in a week or two. If you can go on to those as well, they add to your CV and show that you really mean it. And they're like extra qualifications. And also you meet different people from different silos.
Yeah, on that, Morgan, I just dropped out for a second. We would like to know if there's any specific volunteering opportunities that any of you guys could recommend students towards.
We have them. Let me have a look. I'll see if I can put it on the website.
We don't have volunteering opportunities, but whilst in lockdown, I did do a course on edX, and they do all of these free courses that you can learn more about anything. So I did mine on sustainable designs of buildings, and I learned all of these new things that I wouldn't have learned in my course because I did electrical and electronic engineering. So yeah, I know edX do them. I think they're mainly on edX, and I know some universities also offer them, and they're all free of charge. Yeah.
Could you drop a link for us?
Yeah. I'll look for it and I'll drop it.
Way ahead of you. I've done it.
Amazing. So I can't believe time seems to be flying here. It's so interesting to hear everything that you have to say, and I want to just open up and give an opportunity if anyone's on the call, they wanted to unmute or put their video on and ask a question maybe on the chat. There's a lot of amazing ideas talking about sustainability in the global community. It's very easy, I think, to sort of think about things in terms of what sustainability would mean for us here. Maybe actually, Selego, with your work that you've been doing in sub-Saharan Africa, you could talk a little bit about the contrast between, you know, learning a bit more. Obviously, you have some heritage in Africa. Maybe that helped to inform a little bit more about how you understood things.
Yeah, definitely. So the project was introducing Simon's, I think I already mentioned it, but just to reiterate, Simon's technology into this rural communities, and we did a lot of surveys just so that we could know about the gender dynamics and especially the workers who's going to be using those technologies, so the Gary Fryers, and kind of understand what they are like, or their daily lives are even like in some cases, just so that we could get about understanding what these communities' needs are and what they would like to gain, or what they could benefit from this technology, and how we could introduce it to them in an inclusive way and a sustainable way as well. Because in rural communities, they don't have technology. Most of them are illiterate, so you have to be able to accommodate for them. If that makes any sense, yeah. So yeah, I mean, with me being an African as well, I think I could relate to it a lot more because my parents, they don't speak proper English, or they've come from areas like that, and I've been made aware of the challenges that they've faced as well whilst they were younger, and I could relate more to the people or the communities that we were doing the surveys in, which helps us create a better survey overall. Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. So we do have a question. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, maybe I can add to that, if that's okay, because I've worked in Africa, I've worked in Southeast Asia, often in a quite poor context as well, with poor communities. And I think what Selego is saying there is really the key of understanding the needs of the people. So it's not, it's not about the technology, it's about what people actually need. And then see if this technology can serve these needs. But sometimes you also have to be aware of and that relates to wherever you are in the world, if something needs something, you need to understand why and how you maybe be able to also change that need. What do you need to change the behavior, to change the need, to make it then more sustainable? And that is where social science comes in, about behavioral change, because sometimes you not necessarily need a technology, you might need a new approach, a new paradigm of seeing things. And what I've seen, especially in the global south, is that the understanding of sustainability is totally different, because when we talk in Western countries about sustainability, we have long-term thinking. We think about generations, and that things need to develop over a time and will have a long-term impact. But especially in poor communities, and even if it's poor individuals, you always have a thinking from one to another, because it's about surviving. And their concept of sustainability is totally different, and that needs to be served totally different. And I think as long as we're not having fair and just societies wherever in the world, and also a global society which is fair and just, we will struggle to actually achieve climate change targets. We will struggle to achieve food security. Because without social equality, someone will always be left behind, and someone else will make profit on the cost of others. So, and sustainability is about fairness and justice, and not about one having a fancy technology and someone else paying for it.
Can I just jump in really quickly and ask you, just all of you, kind of, whether you're worried about keeping infrastructure sustainable as these developing countries grow? You know, obviously the infrastructure that you guys are trying to put into these countries are, you know, carbon negative or more sustainable, but are you worried, you know, as these countries develop, about making sure that they are sustainable, you know, that stuff's already put in place?
I think if you have a approach which really addresses what people benefit from, then it will continue to succeed. If you put something in just a few benefit from, it might be abused or misused and not being sustainable. So I think it's kind of like what Tsulego said and others on the panel said. It's kind of like, you know, it needs to benefit a lot of people and not just a few.
I think the point that Izzy's raised in the chat is really very valid as well, about you know, the action that individuals can take, and talking about things like boycotting for environmentally, you know, unfriendly products. So there's a lot of you know, when Extinction Rebellion started creating havoc, I literally saw go right up the agenda on politics, you know, this whole thing about you know, carbon emissions and net zero. And we've got COP26 coming along in a few months. So, you know, this country is going to be the focus of this whole agenda globally, you know, this year. And yeah, well, what can you do about it? So Izzy, you've got an MP, you've got councillors, start speaking to them, mobilize your students, fellow students, or your neighborhood people. Just get people to get on the case of politicians and tell them what you want to see, right? I told you I worked in local government. I was the policy support officer to the leader of the council in Leicester City Council. I saw the people who knocked on his door and saying, this is the change we better see you make, otherwise we're voting you out of power, right? And they did. You know, they don't mess around. So find politically active communities, right, who know how to pull the levers of power and mobilize them with your agenda. You know, act like a virus, infiltrate them, and you know, and program them with your DNA, which is, this is the change that the young people want to see, and then get them. Lobbying can work beneficially as well, can't it, Louise? You can lobby, okay, in a positive way to say, yeah, we want net zero to mean this. Net zero must mean that, you know, governments are going to start taxing these big polluters heavily unless we see that those big polluters are making investments that are going to drive a reduction in carbon emissions. But we don't just want reduction in carbon emissions by fancy machines that suck CO2 out of the air. No, we want carbon emission technologies that create co-benefits for the poor people on the ground. Like that was why Tsulego and West were doing the work for us. We were saying, how can we create benefit by introducing you know, a technology that's going to remove carbon emissions? So you know, become informed by, you know, and so today you're doing that by being part of this discussion. and then, you know, link up with people. You know, send me a LinkedIn invite if you want. I can link you with loads of people. And yeah, and get active and you know, inspire and motivate those around you to put politicians and decision makers in big companies as well under pressure. Start posting things on social media. Start making it very visible. Have a voice. Yeah. So if your voice has to be heard. So nowadays you've got the social media platform. So that's exactly what West Kick did, isn't it? Right. That's what this whole event is. It's like becoming more visible with your voice. So there's loads that you can do and to make that change happen, but you've got to drive it. Yeah. So all the best to you, and anything that I can do to help. Yeah. Yeah. I'm on LinkedIn. You'll find me easily. All right. Happy to help. God bless.
So inspiring. Goodness me. Right, I'm very conscious of time. We need to wrap up, and I just wanted a very quick sort of line from each of you to sort of, what would you like people to take away from this Green Forum and discussion today? Can we start with you, Louise?
Right. Okay. Hello, everyone again. I've posted a couple of volunteer opportunities, both at CAT, and there's one in Repowering London, which is Agamemnon Otero, which is another one of our old students, you know, creating change makers. I'm sad we didn't get Simon, actually. But yeah, my takeaway thing would be to try and keep cheerful about it. I know that sounds really odd, but do the things that you can do and don't get hung up on the things you can't do. So it doesn't matter, we all have these things in our lives because we're living in a carbon economy, and we're living in a linear we're living in a linear economy, we're living in a sexist economy, we're living in a racist economy. So within that, see where the agency is and do your bit and be happy. And as a very sad Radio 2 listener, I can say that Claudia Winkleman on a Saturday morning, when she has her ta-da moments, so instead of saying to-do list, you say ta-da when you've done it. And it's a much better way of looking at things, and it does help you with this like climate weight, which we have put on. I say we, actually my parents' generation have put on the younger generation. Right, we've caused it, off you go and sort it. You know, it's so just try and keep your chin up.
Thank you. Salego?
Thank you, Anita, for organising this festival. And also, I would say stick to your morals and your ethics, especially now, because I think it's all university students, especially since this panel is for most university students. I mean, definitely when you're looking for a job, stick to your morals and your ethics. Yeah, I think those are the two things I would say.
Beautiful. Miriam?
Yeah, I would say be conscious of what you do. Every little, as Lee said, every little thing you do has an impact and can help, but it also can go in the other direction. So be conscious of your behavior and the impact it has on others.
So circular, isn't it? Simon, final words. Thank you.
Yeah, well, carbon removal is superior to carbon offsetting.
Wow. Thank you so much, everyone. This has been heartwarming and inspiring. I'm really looking forward to connecting with everyone that's been able to see this today. We will be making a newsletter from all these really incredible nitbits of knowledge and wisdom that we've been learning. And we will be posting these recordings online. And then finally, tomorrow, we're going to have our third Green Forum. So we're halfway through now, aren't we, Morgan?
Ready, yeah.
Yeah, tomorrow is sustainability in the West Midlands. Super excited. We've got the sustainability manager for Commonwealth Games and some really other sustainability, the CEO of Sustainability West Midlands, really amazing talk. Patricia Thornley is going to be there. She's the head of EBRI. So we'll be talking about more about European bioresearch and hopefully talk about the network of energy in the UK. but really looking forward to that. And then finally on Friday, we're going to have sustainability at our university. So we'll bring it zoom right back down to where we are, the here and now. So thank you so much, everybody, for your time and for listening, and look forward to connecting again in the future. Thank you.
And thank you, Morgan and Gabriella, for hosting this brilliant event. Well done for bringing it together.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
those are
so
powerful and influential people you've got coming tomorrow, so they're impressed with what you're doing. Yeah,
Well, we'll be
make the
taking
most of it.
advice about getting into these the minds of these these influential people for sure.
Infect them with your agenda.
We will do. Thank you so much, and I just wish it was longer. That's all.
Thank you so much for organising and inviting me. Really, really grateful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye
Thank
bye
you.
from Lagos.
Well done, and it was really fun. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.